2, 1. All right, folks, let's get this show on the road. Thanks so much for coming to this huddle. Last time we had a pretty good discussion surrounding all sorts of issues that come about during a transaction. And this was a list that basically came about through a little fast-paced question and answer session that I had with agents in my office about what's the worst things that's happened to you or the most common issues that we face in the transaction. And last time we covered about half of it. So this time I'm hoping to breeze through some of this stuff. And I think these are all, I think at least once a year we should cover all these just in general without focusing on, document-specific topics. So we'll jump into this too, and I do believe we'll have some time at the end. And I want to talk about multifamily properties, specifically duplexes through fourplexes, as that's really primarily what I think our agents should handle. Anything beyond that, I think we need to involve commercial agents to help us out, but we can certainly handle duplex through fourplexes. So we're going to talk about some ins and outs of that. And as always, if you have questions, comments, or want to contribute or share your own stories, do not hesitate. This goes by and is much more enjoyable when you contribute. So without further ado, let's jump in and let's have this discussion. So last time, I think we talked a bit about environmental issues that are surrounding your transactions. And we talked about everybody's favorite subject, methamphetamine. We ended, I think, on that methamphetamine, mold, that type of thing. So today we're going to talk about legal title, investing, some of the issues that can come up during those transactions. A couple of things that did come up. Changes in names. So, you might get married and change your last name. You might change your name altogether because you just don't like your name anymore, which is, you know what? More of us should do that. I just don't like my name. I'm going to be something cooler, like a Brock or a Drew or something other than a very mundane Mike. Maybe I want that and I want to change my name. And I go ahead and do that. And I'm something a lot cooler than Mike. But I haven't changed it on our title. Yeah, you need to go get those things taken care of. But more importantly, because think about the issues surrounding that. So we're Mike Fondario on title, but I decided my new name is Brock Lesnar, and Brock Lesnar is signing this contract and trying to sell a piece of property that belongs to Mike Fondario. We are one and the same, but we are kind of not the same. So just know that those things, we can handle those things with our title company. We should really lean on them to handle these issues. But more importantly, these issues are best avoided by giving our transactions to our title company well in advance of anything we put under contract. And this comes about, can easily present itself in many forms. It's not all the time that we're, making offers on property or representing a seller where, we get plenty of lead time and we get to contact the title company and see what's up. Sometimes it's fast paced. We get a phone call, help us handle this transaction, put it under contract, write it up, all sorts of scenarios in which we can find ourselves kind of behind the 8 ball when it comes to title investing. So, just make sure that you're leaning on your title company to handle these issues in name changes. Closely related to this, and I think we talk about this quite a bit, but it always bears repeating. When we involve estates and trusts and LLCs, I always do this reminder in that. The LLC, sometimes I feel like LLCs are maybe slightly easier, the documentation's easier, and the people behind the LLC understand it probably better because they deal with it more frequently. The people involved in states frequently do not understand it and don't know what their role is or who's supposed to sign because, how often are you really dealing with this? And for the vast majority of people, they're only dealing with handling of estates and trust, after the death of a loved one or somebody. So, and they're just stepping into it, and they make assumptions about what their role is based on a conversation they had 15 years ago. So it's always best to double down on the question. Who is, and the questions would be who gets to sign on behalf of the estate? Is it all of you? Is it just one of you? And and before we move forward, before we get listing documentation signed, we need to make sure we understand who that is. And on the flip side, if we're representing a buyer and they're buying through the estate or a trust or whatnot, those are the things that we need to have a really good understanding of before we write up this documentation. And we need to do our due diligence to figure that out. We can't just, we're supposed to take their word for it, but I think everybody here knows that that's not something that we should just arbitrarily do. We need to trust but verify. Trust but verify. Has anybody recently had any issues surrounding estates, trust, or LLCs that they'd like to share? I do know that very frequently, at least 2 or 3 times a year, I get phone calls that are along the lines of, hey, we just realized that, the executor of the trust isn't the only one who's supposed to sign. All the siblings are. And as second I hear all the siblings are, it's never one. It's always 9. 9 other people have to sign, and it's a mess. It's not just like, oh, it's just 2 brothers or 2 sisters that got to take care of us. No, we have 17 siblings that need to also sign somehow on this documentation. And it's really awkward, and we don't know how to handle it. So anyway, yeah, that's always the issue. Scott says that's when you jack up the earnest money. Yeah. But that's a serious problem. I think it's never really surmounted to anything. It's always cleaned up quite nicely, but really what we're saying is we don't have a valid contract, right? We just created something, and it's not a valid contract because the people who are supposed to sign haven't signed. So it's actually Leslie says, can Scott elaborate at what point? Actually, really good question. Really
I'm
good
happy
question.
to answer that.
I'll jump in and just say that, well, from 2 angles. If you are a listing agent and you represent a buyer, oh my gosh, Mike, you can't do. Let me start over. If you're a listing agent and the buyer notifies you that, hey, we got to get more signatures on this documentation, that means you don't have a valid contract. And as a listing agent, they can't just arbitrarily go, oh, we're adding more signatures to this now. Maybe you could if it was like in the moment, like, hey, I just forwarded you an accepted contract, and that was 15 minutes ago, and I realized I got to get more signatures on it. Maybe somehow, they can escape without some real damage there. But you as the listing agent should, slow this down and say, hey, this is not acceptable. Especially, I think what he's referring to, Leslie, is you're under contract, and a few, 3 or 4 days later or what have you, they discover that all the siblings need to sign. And they don't just get just add their names and call it good. That's not how that works. So yeah, they got to come back to you and go, hey, are you going to be okay with this? Because this is sort of a reason to cancel for a seller. Like there's a legitimate reason for them to cancel because, the people who you don't have a valid contract because the buyer didn't actually sign the contract.
Hey, Mike, that wasn't even what I was thinking, to be honest.
I think that's what he's referring to. Yeah, and it's and I always say this too, and I actually had this conversation with Scott earlier this week, I believe. When anything changes that sort of comes out of the blue, comes out of left field that was unexpected, that's always the time when you stop, reassess the situation. Are we still in the same position we were before? Has anything changed? Do we need more assurances from a buyer who made all sorts of claims about their readiness and their capabilities and their trustworthiness, all those things, and now it's turning out to potentially not be true. Yeah, it's always a moment to pause and reassess our situation, regardless of the side we're on. So I think that's what he's referring to. So anyway, there is that. Moving on, when we talk about this is kind of closely related. Boundary and line disputes. There's I think I have two of those sort of going on in my offices right now, that we're having boundary disputes, and those are very problematic. And quite frankly, as real estate agents, we don't have a lot of tools in the bag to really resolve these issues. We can be passive aggressive. We can do all sorts of stuff that maybe we don't want to do like that. But when it comes to boundary line disputes, for instance, there's a situation going on in one of my offices where there was a recent lis pendens filed on a boundary dispute because of a fence claim. Someone put up a fence and the neighbor said, no, I'm going to sue you about this and I'm going to file a lawsuit, and they put a lis pendens on the title, thereby ending any chances we have to actually get a deal done anytime soon. So if there is boundary disputes, or you're aware of a boundary dispute, we need to, it's really hard to proceed. You can't get anything done if you don't have a survey. So that's our advice there. Yeah, you got to go get a survey. That's where we bring an expert in. There's not much else for us to do there. And we know that we just need to stop what we're doing and reassess that. Scott says the more people that need to sign, the more likely they will miss a deadline. Ain't that the truth? And I feel like if you got 5 random people in a room and try to convince them of something, you would have better luck than if you got 5 family members in a room and try to convince them of something. And so if you got a lot of people that need to sign a contract, good luck. Especially if they're related. I just don't know what it is. I just don't know what it is. Anyway, yeah, boundary line and land use disputes. And we've had some doozies, I feel like, there's nothing that says, that you can't make phone calls on behalf of your client and just say, hey, is there a path forward that we could resolve the dispute? What does that look like? And that might be my recommendation, actually, is that, when people call me about due diligence issues and repair issues, the first thing out of my mouth is, what does it cost to fix the problem? Because, so many of these things are, they're kind of complicated. We got to hire a third party. We got to get multiple bids, and time's involved, and that timing could interfere with our deadlines. And so, but the first place to start is, what are the damages? Because that is how you start to make future decisions about how to proceed. And even if it's a boundary line dispute, it's probably not advisable that we, maybe as a listing agent or a buyer's agent, contact the other party and negotiate that on our client's behalf. Like, let's not do that. But maybe our advice to our clients is, why don't you just call them and figure out what they want? Because if they want $2,000, well, seems like that's a pretty solvable issue that seems complicated. It is a complicated issue, but if it's $2,000, can't be that complicated. If they want $150,000 and your home is worth $400,000, well, now we have a massive problem that, we're not going to solve. And the motion detector light in my office just went off. There we go. So always start there. Like, cash has to solve a problem some way. And if we have to use cash, how much cash will that take? Like, that's our advice to our clients. Go figure that out. If they know that number already and they're unwilling to do it, their options are maybe we can help them find an attorney to resolve a boundary line dispute, or zoning issues. But otherwise, our hands are sort of tied here, other than finding the right resources for them. So there you have it. there you have it. I think this next one, difficult life transitions, we'll call it, because there's all sorts of them that happen that cause some disruption in a transaction. I think the most common one is divorce. That's a very common scenario for us, and for those of you who've been in that scenario, it's a learning curve. And there's if you were good at handling divorce transactions, you could probably on your own teach a really good class on handling personalities and conflict, because that's really can be what it is. If you've been in the business long enough, you have an example of when a divorce transaction went great, and they amicably split, and they just understand what their role is, and on the other side of that, if you've been in the business long enough, you've had some very contentious divorce situations. If it does get contentious, I think the first thing that you need to do is sit down with both parties on a call, on a Zoom, in person is preferred, and have a frank discussion with both of them in the same room about what your role is. And your role is to execute the wishes of the owners of the property. So, which means the owners of the property are both people. And so if they can't come to terms, they don't get to use you as leverage to, apply leverage to the other person for one thing or another. There's nothing worse. There's almost no worse look for a real estate agent when they're favoring one seller over the other. It's a really bad look, and can get us into some hot water. And you don't want to be there anyway. I mean, I don't think anybody instinctually wants to be in the middle of that type of scenario. And I will say, if both parties may agree to that, but if it does get bad, remember that your conversation should turn to written conversations. And maybe you're on a group thread for text messaging, or everybody's all included in the same email thread. It's okay for an individual party to ask your opinion on things, but it's not okay to take instruction from individual parties. So if one party wants to give you instruction, and the other party is CC'd on those things, we can probably proceed. But again, you should use the context of the situation here and go, is the other party likely to agree with this? Or if you're unsure, you make phone calls and just say, hey, I'm looking for an affirmative from the other party as well. So make sure that you're including everyone, and also ask them if they want their attorneys included in all your communications as well. Because if they do, you're almost always going directly to email to handle the problem and communicate that way. Not to say that we don't want attorneys involved, but they can make a scenario, a transaction, more complicated. Not to say that that's good or bad, but inevitably the transaction will probably be more complicated. So understand that, and reaffirm what your role is in a divorce situation. Let's see. Now, here's a couple questions, because I've had all of these scenarios. I've dealt with all of these scenarios, a couple of them personally, and of course all of them as a broker. Actually, let me go back to the divorce situation, because this is actually a frequent topic. And the answer is, I won't give you an answer. I'll ask the question. This happens frequently. Let's say person A is the person on title with the property, but person B is married to them. And in the state of Utah, if you are married, it doesn't matter if you're on the title, right? You're married, so that falls under divorce laws. You don't just get to play the game of, oh no, it's in my name. Like you get that property under divorce laws. So they have an interest in the property. Do they get to give you direction on how that is handled? What say you? Berkeys, what say you? I'll also give some bonus points out here. Let's make it 5,000 bonus points to the correct answer. And also, I'm 75% sure on my answer here. There's a percentage here where I'm not wholly confident on my perspective. And if I actually were put into a tough spot, I'd make some phone calls and get to make sure I felt better about my answer. Come on, let's hear it, Berkey's. Does the person who has interest in the property actually get to give you direction as the listing agent? Kimberly asks a really good question. Are they the client? Are they? So let's just say Judy Johnson is on title and Bob Johnson has an interest, like there is a divorce decree about their interest in this property. A judge has said, you get money from this property. You have an interest in this property. Who's the client? It's actually the first best question. Who is your client? Is it Judy Johnson who owns the property, or both Bob and Judy Johnson because Bob has interest?
Hey, Mike.
Somebody is talking, and it appears as though, again, my speech is not working. All right, Doug, try again with
All
that
right.
answer, please.
Sorry, I'm driving, so it might be my issue. But I guess I would argue that you should have identified that person as both those people as your client when you ran title to list that property, right? But otherwise, I mean, if they have interest in the property, then whether or not they're on your listing agreement, you're representing them, their interest, right?
It's actually, I don't know that I wholly agree with that.
I guess I should have said that. That's more of a question than.
So listen, to have like, let's say that was your, like, yeah, that's how it goes. It's not a bad answer. It makes sense. Like there's a judge that says that you have interest in this property. But the problem is they don't actually have the ability to give you instruction because they're not the client and they're not on the listing agreement. Okay.
But Mike, couldn't I argue though that's like the fraud that we've had recently, where someone tries to sell a vacant property that doesn't belong to them? I mean, in some sense, is that not very similar? In that, yeah, I'm signed with old Bob from Florida, but he doesn't actually own the property. Well, that argument doesn't really stand up. Well, if they're anyway, I guess I'm just wondering whether or not their name's on it. If they actually have legal interest in the property, does it really matter who's on your listing agreement?
It's a really good question. I believe, I'm confident, though not really confident that that's the right answer. Though the practical answer, the one that I think solves the real problem that we're talking about here is that if there has been a divorce decree issued, and let's say Bob Johnson calls you and go, by the way, I know you're listing our property. I want to know what's going on. I want a copy of the listing agreement. Your first call is to Judy Johnson and say, hey, I would really like to talk to your divorce attorney. Because most of the time, the divorce attorney will go, okay, here's your instruction. Most of the time they want you communicating with Bob Johnson, or at least Bob Johnson is in the communication queue. Okay. So if you do come up on the scenario, and it's actually very common, make sure that you have an attorney involved. And if let's say Judy Johnson is like, no way, you're not talking to my attorney. Bob is the worst person in the world. I forbid you from talking to them. We have probably a real serious problem on our hands. Because I don't know, because listen, Bob's attorney, right or wrong, could easily cause a problem. Like I've been the broker on a deal that was kind of similar to this, and it was an absolute nightmare.
Mike, I have a question.
Yeah, hit it.
What if in this process of getting a divorce decree and having the two parties, what if Judy, for example, your fake person here, what if she didn't have an actual attorney when they filed the divorce and got the divorce decree and she was self-represented? What would you do at that point?
I think you would. Oh, so you're saying like Judy didn't have an attorney, but there is a divorce decree giving Bob some interest in this property.
Correct.
I think we have to.
Bob wants info.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to get permission from our client to give it. I just think we do, because it sort of goes to the heart of the matter. Even like an LLC, for example, there could be 50 members of an LLC, and there's only 2 members who have to sign. So is it our problem that the other 48 members might hate this decision? I mean, it's kind of our problem, but we can only follow, the people who have the authority to sign are the people that have the authority to sign, and they're our clients. And it would also lend itself to, well, do I have to, in my scenario where Bob has the interest and is not on title, do we have to consult Bob about the listing agreement before we get it signed? I would argue that you don't. Like I don't think we put our foot down this hard. We only put our foot down in Sandy's scenario where we have no other paths to take. The answer how we navigate something like this is like, hey, let's get divorce attorneys involved and see what their perspective is. Because if we start taking direction from the divorce attorneys, it really takes a massive amount of stress off of us. And to the point where I've been involved in scenarios where in a divorce where for a week, the divorce attorneys are sending emails back and forth, and we're all included about a decision that needs to be made. And the great part is we just have to sit back and wait till we have clear instruction. And, one party has interest, but they're not on title, right? And so, there you get to let the attorneys need to fight that out and give clear direction, okay? Because there's consequences for in a lot of scenarios. Let's say if they're going through court and they have a judge who's presiding over it, and Judy is playing games about this scenario, and Bob gets Judy back into court, the judge will do something about it. Like there's real world consequences for Judy if she's playing a game. Okay. So, but as far as it goes with us, like, maybe we receive, there's all sorts of weird scenarios, but I think that's the bottom line. If you don't have clear instruction and you're saying, hey, I've got Bob in my ear. He's calling and texting me all the time. I'm talking to him, but I don't feel like I can reveal information because he's not my client. It's true, he's not your client. And so we should be very cautious about moving forward, because you're really moving forward with conflict before you, and you shouldn't move forward until that conflict is resolved. You should, play it slow, and get your broker involved for sure, and take some liability off of you. Put it on the broker. Make sense? Michelle says, an interest is not equal to an ownership interest, is it? Well, it depends. There's all sorts of scenarios in which you could use that sentence. But in my scenario, it's not. Because that's actually Michelle's question, the way she phrased it is maybe the perfect way to phrase it. Because think about what we're saying. They have interest likely in the proceeds of the sale. Okay? They don't have interest in the property. They have interest in the proceeds of the sale from our perspective. And so that's the dividing line there. But as you could see, like you already see the problem with that scenario already, right? In that a judge has already declared that you get a part of the proceeds of the sale. And so in some ways you have an interest in the sale of the property, and it's in your best interest to sell it for the most. And if you've been in this business long enough, you know that, people get a divorce for a reason. They don't like each other. And sometimes they will do things out of spite that are not in their best interest. Because you're like, well, your best interest is to get the most money you possibly can. No, my best interest is to hurt the other person. That's their perspective. And many of us have been in that scenario. So you got to be careful. You definitely have to be careful. That's a toughie. It's a toughie. Let's see. Anybody have any other comments on that one? divorces, tough life situations. Oh, the couple of things that I was going to talk about too. Incarceration. Been dealt with this. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be rare, but we're going to talk about it. These are difficult life transitions and problems that you could possibly have. The only problem that you have with someone who's incarcerated is access and getting them to actually sign documents. They can do everything that a free person can do. Let's just say it's a person who's not incarcerated. You just have to get over there and not pass any sharp objects while they sign some stuff, I would assume. But yeah, they can do whatever they need to do. It just takes a lot longer to respond, so make sure you have plenty of lead time. I don't know how the prison system works, or if you can only visit on Wednesdays. I don't know. But maybe that's a thing, and you'd be like, hey, you're going to have to wait till next Wednesday for a response. I don't know, but those are the details you're going to want to discover. This one I've had a couple of times. What happens to our contracts or our listing agreement if someone passes away? I'll give you 2,000 bonus points for this one. It's not very difficult. What if they pass away? Going once, twice, sold to no one. If they pass away mid-contract, all bets are off. You have no contract. It's not enforceable. And obviously our listing agreements are not enforceable, and they go away. Of course, I don't know that anybody ever really wants to fight those, but that's the bottom line. Somebody passes away mid-contract, it's done. It's done. I haven't had that scenario happen to me personally. On a personal transaction, someone did give us a call. I was trying to sell something, and I was actually excited it was going to be sold, and the buyer called and said, hey, I just got diagnosed with terminal cancer, so I'm going to need to back out. And that was unfortunate, and we didn't have to let him out, and of course we let him out because we're like to think we're not horrible people. And then the Great Recession happened, so not great timing for me. But anyway, that's whole nother conversation. So yeah, that's all bets are off there. And anybody have any more comments on those? So that's legal title vesting. Let's see, 136, we got time. Next, inspections and closing processes. How do you handle, this is a common issue people wanted to talk about, managing the entourage, inspections where buyers bring excessive guests and start negotiating subsequent repairs. I think the most famous one is, the buyers bring the dad and does the dad inspection, and everybody's like, the dad inspection is the worst. And you know what? I kind of agree. There's some dads out there that should be totally qualified to be the inspector. But if you're just a homeowner, I don't think that qualifies you to do the inspection, and you should not go with your kid. I'm kidding. You should go with them. Yeah. So the entourage, I think if you're the listing agent and you know that an entourage is about to enter the house, you need to put the brakes on that and say, no, let's limit this. Like, we're not going to tell you your dad can't walk through. But to bring a massive amount of people through the house, I think is a problem, and it's happened before. But be there, be present, and if they do it, I don't know that you're going to tell them don't come through the house, inspectors. But maybe you do. Maybe you say there's too many people in this house, and I can't guarantee the security of it. You would know that when you're there. If you have that feeling, you've answered your own question. Yeah, there's too many people in this house, and I can't handle the security of it. Also, if they're hiring a professional to inspect the home, the professional wouldn't want this either. If we're the buyer's agent, we have more control, in my opinion, of this scenario. Have an idea who wants to go through this inspection. If they're hiring a professional, don't get in the professional's way. Let the professional do it. If a family member wants to go through afterwards and do an inspection of their own at a later date, I don't know that that's advisable. If they push hard, that's kind of problematic to me. We should probably do it at the same time. I think as a buyer's agent, maybe that's our recommendation. You go in there, we disrupt the seller one time for home inspections, and we have a day that we do it. And, maybe they come before the property and, the professional that we hired, and they spend, we give them, say, yeah, we can give you an hour for your family to come through and do their inspection, and then our professional will come on the back end. But remember, on this issue, we always recommend professionals handle this, and it's up to them to make the decision. We can't tell them not, we can't we don't have any control over this, but we can offer our advice on this. Let's see, final walkthroughs. I think, I think overall we do a pretty good job, because I don't hear a lot of issues surrounding final walkthrough. But remember, final walkthrough, this is a reminder, final walkthrough is not an opportunity to inspect the home. A final walkthrough is just to inspect a couple of things. One, to make sure the home is in the same general condition as it was the day we put it under contract. And two, to inspect any potential repairs that we asked for, or things that we asked to be changed during the contract. And also, it is a pretty good opportunity to check on items that we've requested remain, like included items or excluded items. Some of the problems surrounding that, though, if we say, hey, you've got an old car in the back, and we've already had a discussion, and it is specifically excluded because we thought, we'd have a problem with this. If it's still there, all that is another opportunity to address the problem. But they have up until the day of closing to get rid of that, right? So, but it is an opportunity to go, hey, I still see that car out back. Are you going to be, are we squared away? Do you have a plan? That's the question you want to ask, not are you going to do it? When you ask, are you going to do it? Their answer is, yeah, we're going to do it. If you ask, do you have a plan to remove that? I think that might, might be slightly a better question to evoke the answer, more truthful answer. Anyway, final walkthrough. Possession hurdles. I think this is something agents talked about in our discussion, managing post-closing possession agreements, and discussing clear timelines on this. Yeah, I think if we're on top of our game, we handle this really well. But you just because you're on top of your game, the agent on the other side may not be in the same vein. I've had issues where a listing agent didn't communicate what possession was, and they were possession at recording, and the clients arrived. Of course, they arrived with their vans and their equipment and cheerful people and all sorts of stuff, and the seller isn't packed, right? They were like, I thought I had 24 hours, and the seller's plan was to pack up their entire house in 24 hours. And of course, y'all can see where this is going. That is just a miserable way for your clients to arrive at a house. This whole stressful time, it's over. We're so excited. We get to move on with this new period of our life, and they walk up and that's going on. So remember, that's a really long, detailed conversation for you to have. I also think that's a conversation that you can kind of automate. That you can take that out of your hands if you have some checklists that you follow. Some of the things I recommend for, when we have classes about customer service or what have you, some of the things that I think are pretty good ideas are, there's all sorts of parts of the process, the transaction process, that you can make a video about, right? You can just record yourself, upload it into Resource Center, and when the time comes, you just send it. And it explains everything, and they watch the video. And one of those videos could be, by the way, this is what possession is. And, so look at your contract. It's on this spot, and maybe you can enter some text into the email, and so they know what the exact date is. You should be fully packed by this date. You should be completely moved out. The contract also, as a reminder, your contract also says it needs to be broom clean and free of personal belongings. So that includes, the things that you think that you're leaving behind as a favor. They didn't ask for the favor, so don't do the favor and leave all these things behind. You can preset a lot of these things to have those discussions to make sure you're on top of your game. But it's always worth those phone calls. Hey, You know, closing's coming up in 2 days. Are you guys ready to give possession to them at closing? Because that's at recording, because that's what our contract says. Are you ready for that? Do that ahead of time. Don't do that 24 hours in advance, because if they're not ready, we haven't really, I mean, it's better than the day of, but you know, it's a little, it's tough there. And by the way, this is a really good reminder about possession. If you have conflict on possession and it's clearly the other agent's fault, our instincts, you know, it is very stressful for us because we got to call and give our clients bad news. Remember, your clients will be so mad, and it could be obviously one single person's fault. Be very careful in these scenarios, because if someone wants to be spiteful, they can really, really hurt the person who's about to move in. And I'll give you the scenario that I was personally involved in as a broker. I got a phone call and said, Mike, we're over at this address. My clients are here. Come on over. And, you know, I just heard the sound in their voice, so I just drove over there. Fortunately, it's close to the office. And I get there, and there's a moving van on the street. There's a moving van in the driveway. And there is a person that's sort of clearly stomping around and making a lot of noise in the garage. And it turns out that the buyers arrived, and the seller should have been out, and the buyer went up and had attitude with the seller. And I don't know what was said, I wasn't there, but it gave him serious attitude. And in response, the seller closed the garage, went into his house, locked all the doors. This was on a Friday, and finally moved out Monday night. And that's what happened. And it was horrible. And what did the police do when the police arrived? Absolutely nothing. Ugh. They didn't do anything, because it's a civil matter, and this is it falls under tenancy laws. And if you want to evict them, you got to go through the court system to evict them, because they're now tenants. Okay. So remember, this is the time. Even we got to bite our tongues. We got to be super professional. We gotta, you know, say things we don't want to say, but we got to keep people buttered up, even if we hate their guts, in order to make that transition as smooth as possible. And any of the issues that we feel like we need to solve, or things that we should say to people, and we do those after the fact, after everything's been resolved and people are where they're supposed to be. And by the way, I'm not saying to never address like a problem or an agent's shortcoming. I think you should always, like, if it's bad, at a minimum, you need to make a phone call and go, hey, that wasn't okay. You messed up there. You caused real problems, and you should know this. And I don't think you should say it as an vindictive way, but you need to call and let them know, because if we don't, we're an industry where if we're not policing ourselves, nobody else is. We can't rely on the board of realtors. We can't rely on the state. We have to police ourselves. And so, you know, I think you got to do it. The problem is people don't do it professionally, and then we just fight about it and no one learns anything. Anyway, off that soapbox. Here's another issue that agents frequently have problems with. Inventory accuracy, resolving failures regarding specific inclusions or exclusions in the contract. This is where really long conversations should happen beforehand. And as you walk through a property, one of the problems is, you know, you show a home as a buyer's agent, and you walk through the property, and you know, you're not necessarily thinking, hey, every single home I go through, I need to take an inventory, because they might want to include this later, because you have 6 other homes to show that day, and we're looking at homes all weekend. That's not a thing. But these things, you know, you got to rely on your list. You got to have very lengthy conversations about what they want excluded or excluded. And if you're a listing agent, the same goes. If they want to keep a chandelier, get rid of it before you list the home. Take care of that problem now. Like, it's so much easier to do that than make a mistake later on and we pay for a new chandelier. Okay, I'll ask the crowd. As soon as I turn on my motion light, I'll ask the crowd here. I do have professionalism and communication issues to talk about, or we can jump into the multifamily stuff and give you a quick perspective on that. What say you? Huddle audience, what say you? First person to answer gets to direct the direction we go. Bueller. I feel like Kimberly already knows what she wants to say. Natalie says multifamily. Here we go. Without further ado. Hey, so multifamily, really what we're talking about here is duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. That's it. If you want to buy, if you represent somebody or you want to list something that is more than 4 units, you need to consult with your broker and involve a commercial agent because that is a commercial transaction. The dividing line is 4 transactions. You can get FHA financing. That makes it, that falls within our purview. Are you licensed to sell massive multifamily properties? Yes, you are. As a brokerage, we do not want you to do that for very good and logical reasons because the vast majority of our agents are focused on residential stuff. And quite frankly, as a former commercial agent who tried to do his own transaction, oh, I can go buy my own home. Ooh, not a good decision. I lucked out and there were no problems, but I realized quickly I didn't know what I was doing. There's all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of ins and outs. You just don't know because it's not your world. And so we shouldn't play a game with other people's money in that scenario. So one thing I wanted to do real quick is I wanted to give you perspective. I wanted to give you sort of a, I don't know what word to choose here. I wanted to give you sort of a more realistic perspective on this problem. So you also have this perspective. To some degree, to give you some way to start your conversation. All right, you should be seeing my screen right now, and I've got a couple multifamily properties pulled up. These just happen to be, I selected everything that was active under contract or sold in Cottonwood Heights just to narrow it down. We've got 5 properties we're looking at. I just wanted to give you some perspective on, this is my perspective. It's not everybody's perspective. So don't feel like I'm the end all on this because there's a lot to learn here. But here's what I wanted to talk about. One, you can look at the unit configuration, but really what I wanted to focus on in this discussion was income and what it means to your clients and what their expectations are. Because I feel like, this is just one man's opinion, I feel like in most scenarios, the only reason why someone should or could buy 2 to 4 units is because they have the cash, they want to invest in real estate, maybe they have some rental experience, or they feel like, that's just a good place that they need to dump their money and they can pay cash for a property. That's one scenario. I think, okay, that's a decent scenario. 2, somebody's feeling really entrepreneurial. They want to invest for the future. They're going to occupy one of the units, and the other units are going to subsidize their housing costs. All right, that's like you're motivated. You're out there. You're ready to do the work and put in the grind to make some extra money. I got you. I like it. The scenarios where I think it just doesn't. I don't know how it can make any sense, is that you're going to go finance these things and cash flow them in any way, shape, or form. I don't know how that's possible in 1 to 3 or 4 units with these prices. So let me give you just my perspective on this. Let's look at this price. And the perspective I want to give you too is just relate this to a $785,000 home. Just compare the two, okay? Not that where you want to live, just think about what those mean. And I'm going to scroll down to the one that actually has the numbers here. Right there. Okay. So this property, I'm not saying these are overpriced. I'm not saying any of that. I just want you to have this perspective. $750,000 duplex in Cottonwood Heights. Okay. And there's probably good comparables for $750,000. Let's look at the monthly income, $1,850 and $1,950. So I'm going to do some quick math in my head and it'll be poor, but that's under $4,000. Okay. If you put 20% down, what is your payment on, if you bought a home, somebody with a quick calculator is a calculator here, $750,000 and we put some money down. What is our payment if we've just bought a single family home? Like it's up there. It may be more than $4,000. I don't even know. I'm not doing the math very good in my head. But the bottom line is there a scenario, even if we put half down where, so if we have a $400,000 loan, let me do the math because I think I have a loan calculator on my phone. Let's just do it. because we're here. I'm going to do the half down scenario so we have something to talk about. We're going to do $375,000 loan. And let me even do that. And we're going to say we can get a 6% interest rate. Okay. All right. So we're going to get 6%, 375,000. We put half down. And our principal and interest payment there is, we're going to round it at $2,250. Okay. And then we add insurance. Where's our insurance number here? Oh, did I scroll past? Not insurance, sorry, taxes. So we add another, let's say $350 on top of that. We are sitting at $2,700. And then add insurance. So let's just make it $3,000. We're cash flowing under $1,000, and we just took out a $375,000 loan. And there's no wrong answer. There's no wrong answer. This is also your responses here is also to give you perspective. How many people would do this deal if they had, let's say, $375,000 in cash, would go buy a duplex, get half down, and cash flow under $1,000 a month? Let's just say it's 800. You're cash flowing $800 a month on your 375,000. Do you do that deal? Natalie says no. Anybody else want to contribute? Just how you feel. Like, there's legitimately no answer, because depending on who you are, what your goals are, all sorts of scenarios, the answer could be easily yes. I would do that.
Hey, Mike, there's a lot of reasons. There's good and bad on that. Depends on who you are. Self-employed real estate agent, want to reduce your taxable income. It's a different scenario than someone that just might want to or cash flow like a retirement.
Yes, that's a really great perspective, Doug. Like, the answer could easily be, if you're that person, the answer is yes. Okay. And so the perspective I want you to have is that, there's, I grew up in a culture where, and it was, people I knew and trusted. So I thought, because they were so smart, I thought they were so smart that this is what you would do. You would give advice on this. Be like, nah, you shouldn't do that deal. No, you wouldn't do that deal. Has nothing to do with what other people want and hope for. Okay. It has absolutely no bearing on what they want to do. Now, my personal perspective is, I'll tell you this, like, just bare bones, no other, and remember, this is just me. My perspective is, I don't want several $100,000 in debt in order to make under $12,000 a year. Like, what I would do in order to make less money is to be boring and buy a CD, because, I've owned rental properties, and I've had to, I've had a bad tenant, and I've had to invest tens of thousands of dollars to do repairs. So that's not what I want. But other people would go, I don't care. Like, I'm in it for 10 or 15 years. It's going to appreciate. And in 10 or 15 years, I'm going to have something very valuable. I'm going to dump the money in. And 15 years from now, my plan is to have a completely paid off property, free and clear. The rents will go up. And this is how I'm going to retire. And I'm going to do this 2 or 3 times. And that's my retirement income. And that's a good idea for them. Okay. So these numbers are kind of rough if you're just strictly from a financial analysis. Like, there's only one variable, and that's cash flow. That's the only variable you get to work for. Some of these numbers are tough, right? But there's all sorts of ways that you can make them not tough. The other things that I want to add to this too, that just to give you some ins and outs maybe on this scenario, on these listings, you'll notice that a lot of people aren't putting the income of these properties in their listings. I think I only saw 2 of the 5 that I looked at actually had rental income numbers on them. Don't make offers on property, and don't start any real analysis until you have those things. You got to have those things in order to analyze these properties. And there's some secret going around. Seems like there's a culture where, oh, we're not going to put that out there. Well, why not? Like maybe 3 months ago, you had this property all over the internet trying to get rents at a certain price. Like, you were trying to attract as many people that you possibly could at a certain number. Like, it's not a secret. So remember, don't start down the road of making offers until you know what that rental income is. Due diligence and rent rolls. If you're a listing agent, make sure that you can put together a rent roll, and it's really easy. Just do some Googling of what should go into a rent roll. It's a very simple, it's just informational. Like, you're just taking the information you have. You're not making any calculations yourself. Create a rent roll and have that ready to distribute, so everybody has that in one location. It's usually just on an Excel spreadsheet. Has the tenants, the term of the lease rate, and maybe the taxes and insurance are on there too. You could do that. There's no exact way you do a rent roll. Some people think you add some stuff to it and you don't. Basically, you're spelling out when leases start, when they expire, and if they're multi-year, do they have any rent increases? Sometimes they do that in residential. It's not as common, but it can happen. And also, you won't get to into two to 4 unit scenario. You're not going to get to look at the lease agreements beforehand, very likely. But remember, you do have limitations on this. I don't think we as real estate agents really want to be giving advice on how good we think this rental agreement looks and what the impact it might have. I think we need to defer a lot of the times on this. Now, I have a lot of experience reading lease agreements. I've read a lot in my life and probably should have kept my mouth shut a lot about what my opinion is on that subject. But that's the bottom line. Even though I have a lot of experience with it, I'm not the person that should be telling them about what's good or bad about their lease agreement. Okay. What we can do is say, hey, I don't know about this paragraph. And because I don't know about it, I think maybe you should seek some outside counsel. We could do that. Right? The same goes with inspecting things on a home. That roof doesn't look great. I don't know though, but because I have my doubts, I would recommend you talk to a professional. I think we can do that. I think that's okay. But remember, there is some limitations there. During your due diligence, inspections can be trickier because the tenants have to leave. But if you represent a buyer, this is a really good opportunity for you to go attend during inspections. And if the tenant's there, the tenant has no loyalty. They will tell you everything. There is no more reliable source. Well, I won't say reliable. They're just a source about what's going on with a property than a tenant. The tenant tells all. They can't wait to spill their guts about a property. And sometimes it's either way. If they're having a good experience with the landlord, they can't wait to tell you, I love living in this place, and they're nervous about someone else taking over. So I would recommend that when you hire a professional, go do any inspections, you attend and be the chatty realtor that everyone knows you to be, and chat up those tenants, because I think it's well worth you and your client's time to understand that. I represented a guy a long time ago, and he was looking at 15 to 20 units and trying to spend a couple $1,000,000, and he insisted on doing the inspections himself. And I learned the only reason he did that was because he wanted to talk to every single tenant and see what was going on in the property. Which didn't work out well for either one of us. We never bought anything. So, anyway, that is too short a time for that subject, but I think gives you some perspective. We'll pick up and I'll reanalyze and not do the rush version of multifamily next time. Thanks for coming, everybody. I hope you actually got some value from this, and stay tuned. We're going to try to bring you something more interesting than this. Thanks, y'all. Have a good week.